is The Brenda Lee Show. The Brenda Lee Show.
Hey, welcome back to the Brenda Lee Show. Hey, I know we're out of the podcast studio. We're going to do this again on the fly simply because there is something that has come up that is on my heart that I have got to share with you today. And so what I want to talk to you about today is communication. And I want to break down a couple misconceptions that can often happen in communication. And this can really happen to people who are starting to change the way that they communicate with people in a way where they've always communicated one way. Now they're choosing different language, different words. They're holding people accountable for actually the questions that they're asking and having them answer the actual question instead of doing blame shifting and deflection and all those things. And so I want to differentiate the difference between controlling a conversation versus having boundaries in a conversation. Okay, so we're going to dive right in. And so I'm going to give you, how many of you have ever been in a conversation where you ask a question and the person gives you some random answer? It has nothing to do with the question that you asked, or they fly back with a question back to you. Now that gets incredibly frustrating, and it's what we call deflecting and or blame shifting in the psychology world, right? Where they're choosing not to answer the question that you asked because they don't want to. And that really, oftentimes, sometimes those people can come back and say, you're trying to control a conversation, when in fact, it's them trying to control the conversation. Okay. So what happens when that happens with me, and my kids know this, and people who engage with me find it out pretty quickly. If I ask a question and you don't answer the question that I asked, or you come back with me with a question, I will say, that's not what I asked. I asked you blank. And then I'll be quiet and I'll wait for the response. And this can get really frustrating to people who have gotten away with doing this blame shifting and the deflection. Okay. It can get really frustrated for them because at that point they're realizing, holy crap, I can't control this conversation. And they'll even sometimes, this is classic textbook projection, they'll project back and say, you're trying to control a conversation. In which I respond and say, no, I just asked a question. You chose not to answer it. I really want the answer to the question, right? Like the solution lies in us being able to communicate, ask questions, get the answer, and then we can evaluate and we can go back and forth. That's how you can get to solution-oriented communication. When you're communicating with someone like this, it becomes really important to become a broken record. If they continue to go down that road, you just repeat, that's not what I asked you. I asked you this question, but and repeat the question, right? The other thing that people will often do sometimes is say, if you're controlling a conversation, if they're not getting the answers they want, or if you're not responding or submitting to them in the way that they want you to, they'll often say you're controlling the conversation. Okay. So this is another tactic on their part to manipulate and control the conversation. Again, textbook projection that they're projecting on you. So this often happens when we lay a boundary down. If we're in communication, the other person starts raising their voice and they start yelling, and we say, hey, listen, we agreed that we're going to have a timeout. And if you go down this road, if one of us goes down this road, it works both ways, right? Like if either one of you elevates and you've made that agreement ahead of time, and now you're in that space, it's time for you to say, hey, pause, timeout. Like we're not going to do this. I'm not having this conversation like this. And oftentimes people get frustrated thinking this is this other person running away from the conversation. And you guys have probably heard me say this before. It's not about running away from the conversation. It's about making a choice in that moment. Is it beneficial for me to carry on in this conversation, or is this going to get ugly and detrimental to our relationship, right? And if you know when you come to that crossroad and you're like, ooh, I think I'm borderline saying some things that I might not be able to get back, and I don't want to hurt this person. I value this relationship. I don't want to destroy it. And so as a result, we're saying, time out. We're taking a time out. Now, if you do that, and if you choose to exercise that option, which is so okay, it's totally okay. There's one caveat to it. You must circle back and come back and complete that conversation. So if you say, hey, I need to take a time out. This isn't working for me. I'm getting frustrated. It's clear you're getting frustrated. We're down the path that we agreed that we weren't going to go down. So do we need to take an hour break, a 5-hour break, a 9-hour break, 36-hour break, whatever it might be, we need to take a break, okay? However, whoever initiates the break must be the one to say, can we agree to come back at 5 o'clock tomorrow? Get an agreement. If they agree to it, say yes, whatever. Get an agreed upon time, and then you must follow through and you must initiate that comeback time. Does that make sense? If you don't initiate that comeback time and you continually kick the can down the line and you're not coming back to full circle to finish the conversation and complete that conversation, you're now losing trust with that person. If you say we're going to circle back to this and you don't, you're breaking down the trust, and you're causing a bigger gap between you and that other person in that relationship. They start to not trust you. They start to see that you don't follow through on your word. They start to see that you aren't going to value them enough to circle back to that conversation in a healthy manner. Now, if you come back to that conversation at 5:00 the next day and you say, dude, I'm still really pissed. I am still not in the right frame of mind. I hate to do this twice, because I do. I absolutely hate to do this twice. This is where emotional regulation comes into play, where if you can't get your wits about you within 12 hours, that shows that there's some emotional regulation work that you need to do on your part, okay? And we're all also human. I've been there. I've done it where it's just like, I am still not ready to have this conversation. I'm still pissed at you, right? And I have to work that out before I can come to the table. When we're pissed at someone, we're coming to the table on attack mode, and we're frustrated, and we're not coming solution oriented. Okay. And so you have the opportunity, rarely, to pull the card out and say, I'm still not ready. Can we do this tomorrow at 5? And if that's the answer, and if they agree upon it, then you kick that can again, and then you've got work to do. You've got work to do to get ready, whatever it takes for you to do. Go for a run, go for a walk, go work out, go listen to music, go dance in the backyard, get grounded, put your bare feet in the ground. I don't care what you've got to do, right? You need to go get grounded. You need to get real. Go stand in a river and journal, whatever it takes for you to get into that space to be ready and prepared to have that conversation. Now, this brings the segue into establishing rules, if you will. I like to call them a framework of agreements of conversation, especially if this is someone that you engage with frequently. If you're engaging frequently with a partner or your boss, and you seem to have this contentious communication style, it behooves both of you to sit down and say, hey, listen, we're struggling with our communication. We value our relationship with each other, and we don't want this, I don't want this to be a struggle. Would you agree? Usually they're going to agree, right? They don't enjoy that unless they just really do enjoy combativeness and fighting. Most people don't enjoy it. So when you say, hey, where do you see the gaps are? And you guys brainstorm together, and you basically create a vision and or a framework for the rules of engagement for you two and how you communicate. So like one kid of mine and I, we can go toe to toe. We can yell at each other back and forth, and we can get done, and we can say, okay, buddy, I love you. Are we clear? Are we good? Yes. And we're done. And we wash our hands. A different kid of mine, if I did that to him, he would go sideways, and he would feel this big, and he would never feel his worth and value. So I have to calmly and gently come down to his level, and I have to speak differently to him. This is what a lot of people call style flexing. We're flexing to the style of the people we need to be with. Now, if you're in a new relationship, that can be really difficult to learn someone else's style, especially if they're not self-aware enough to really let you know. They might think they know, but you can observe some actions that are completely different and incongruent with what they're saying. That makes it harder. It takes longer to learn that with someone. Hopefully, both of you are in it long enough to determine and decide that you're going to learn how to dance with each other, but there are going to be toes stepped on in the meantime, okay? So with this said, though, you come with the person that you're having this contentious communication style with, and you say, hey, can we establish a framework? Do this when you're calm. Don't do this in the middle of a fight, right? But do this when you're calm. And you say, what are the rules of our engagement when we sit down? If we come into the sandbox of Brenda and Bob, what does Brenda and Bob need in our sandbox? What are the rules of our sandbox? What do you need from me? What do I need from you? Right? Do some people are okay with interrupting? Some people are not okay with interrupting. Some people talk over other people. Some people that triggers and pisses them off, right? And so you need to get to the core and evaluate your past experiences with that person and see where the breakdowns happen, right? The goal of this framework is to mitigate breakdowns. If you have a framework in place, if you both agree with it, then you also agree that if one is breaching the agreement, you get to call a timeout, and the other one can be pissed as holy hell if they want to be, but you still get to put a timeout to it, and you still get to table and pin the conversation till you both decide you're ready to come back and adhere to the rules of the framework. Again, some people might call that controlling the conversation. It's not controlling the conversation. It's setting you up for success. This is the best way. Two different people with two different communication styles, two different backgrounds and histories, two different perspectives on why they're hurt, how they got hurt, what the other one did or didn't do, and all the things. It's the best way to set up for success for people to have healthy, constructive conversations where they can actually get to the end goal. And with that framework, here's a really important key component to that. Ensure that you have an end goal in mind. One of the things I just saw this that is fantastic is when people come to a meeting, literally just sit down and say, I see you. And I know that might sound cheesy, but when we just sit down and say, I see you, like genuinely, I see you. I see your heart. I see your desire. I'm not going to judge you by the behavior, by all the things that have been said or not said. I see you as a human, and I value and I appreciate you as a human. And I desire, here's where that vision comes in. Here's where the end goal comes in. I desire for us to come to a solution to X problem. Would you agree that this is the solution? Like you desire to have a solution for that as well. And then give the other person an opportunity to share what their desired outcome is for the conversation. And then when you can get to that understanding, we can break into the whole 3 parts of communication. We've got understanding, bridging the gap, and then you become solution oriented. But there is so much compounded and compacted into communication that we don't realize is absolutely critical. Now, when you step into this space, like I said earlier, when you're changing the way you communicate with people, oftentimes they might get pissed, right? Because they're not able to control and manipulate you the way that they used to. This literally just happened with a client. She was working for this organization and they were abusing the shit out of her. And I was like, okay, like this is what when they say this to you, this is how you respond. This is how you respond in a way that forces them to respect your boundary. And as we're training her, walking her through that, they were getting freaking pissed at her and they were unloading on it. And people ramp up more when that happens, when they're not getting A, what they're used to, and B, what they want out of you in the way that they communicate. They ramp up and they get pissed. Think of like the projection, right? Like the reason people elevate their voice, they feel like they're not being heard. Whether it's not being heard even like because they're supposed to or not, right? Like if they feel they're not being heard, they're not getting their way, they're not getting the desired result, they're gonna exaggerate, they're gonna amplify, they're gonna do whatever it takes for them to try to get back to the place you used to communicate like and get their desired response and reaction and answer from you, which usually would be a yes sir, yes ma'am, whatever it might be, right? When you place those boundaries down and you start saying, nope, that's not going to work for me. Like I told you yesterday, I had this meeting at this time. I'm not going to be able to make that other meeting. When you start doing that, they're going to get pissed. The more you do it, however, the more they're going to back off over time and they're going to settle in and they're going to be like, oh, I've got to respect her or I've got to respect him. Okay. So we'll break down those 3 components of communication in another podcast, but I just wanted to give you guys this input on communication. It's come up twice in my personal life, extraordinarily so in the last couple of days. And then with a client here that I've been dealing with their team just last week. Okay. So if this resonates with you, or if you know someone where you're like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. Wife, could we establish, like, I see, you're going to go to this person. You're going to say, I see a gap in the way that I communicate with you. I desire to communicate with you in a healthy way. Would you be willing to listen to this podcast? And could we sit down and could we establish a framework tonight while we're getting along great, not in the heat of a moment? And let's sign it if you have to, like post it, write it out together. Both of you sign it and say, this is our agreed contract, if you will, of how we are going to communicate. When you do that, now you've got a turn go to, because when you're in the heat of a moment, you're frustrated and you're pissed, your amygdala takes over, you get in fight, flight, or freeze, and now your brain's not thinking, okay? One of you hopefully will be rational enough when you get into an argument, because it's going to happen, when you get in an argument to say, let's pull the framework out. Can we follow these steps? Nobody's controlling this. We're just choosing a better alternative in the way that we communicate, okay? So if that's you, you're going to go and you're going to say I statements. You're going to say, I desire this. I see gaps in my communication. Would you be willing to sit down with me? Listen to my words. Would you be willing, instead of, hey, come sit down with me, or we need to do this? When you say we need to blah, or you need to blah, you've immediately lost them. You've put them on the defensive right away. If you say, would you be willing to sit down and do this? And then when you add on with me, that even engages the emotional connection even more. And what is one of the primary desires of humans at the end of the day? Connection. We all want to be accepted and loved into a community, and that means connection with the people that we're surrounded by, especially our partners and our loved ones, okay? The challenge is, what sucks, we end up usually fighting the most with our loved ones because they see the real us. We're not guarded like we are with all the other people in our life. They see the real deal, and because we feel safe with them, we expose our real self to them much more readily than we do most other people. So anyway, with that said, like I said, if you know somebody that you feel this would resonate with, if you know someone you've had a challenge communicating with, use your statements the framework I just gave you, right? And go to them and say, hey, would you be willing to listen to this podcast? And then could we sit down? Could we schedule a time to sit down and come up with our framework and come up with our vision and our outcome that we desire for our relationship and the communication that we have? Okay. So if this resonates with you, like it, share it with people you want, subscribe to our channel, follow us on all social media. It's the Brenda Lee. I have to compete with the old singer Brenda Lee, which is a disaster for SEO. If any of you know what that means, you know what that means. All right. Okay. I love you guys. We will see you on the other side.